The sound of the slap didn't just echo through the courtroom. It sounded like a gunshot that shattered the heavy silence of the Superior Court. Patricia van der Hoven, the wife of the city's biggest real estate mogul, stood there with her hand still raised, her chest heaving with arrogant rage. She thought she was untouchable. She thought her money could buy the law. She thought the trembling woman she had just struck her son's ex-wife was a nobody with no protection. But Patricia made a fatal miscalculation. She didn't look at the bench. She didn't see the man in the black robes rise slowly from his seat, his face turning a terrifying shade of crimson. She didn't know that the woman she just assaulted wasn't just a gold-digging ex-wife. She was the daughter of the most feared Chief Justice in the state. And school was about to be in session. It is often said that when you marry a man, you marry his family. For Sarah Jenkins, this wasn't just a saying. It was a life sentence. Sarah had met Richard van der Hoven 3 years prior at a charity gala in downtown Chicago. At the time, Sarah was working as a junior archivist for the city library, a quiet, unassuming job that she loved. She was 24, possessed a natural, quiet beauty, and carried herself with a dignity that Richard found intoxicating. Richard was the heir to the van der Hoven shipping empire, a man of 30 with a weak chin and a spine made of gelatin, though Sarah didn't see that then. She only saw a charming man who swept her off her feet with grand gestures and promises of a fairy tale life. But the fairy tale had a wicked witch, and her name was Patricia van der Hoven. From the moment Richard brought Sarah home to the sprawling estate in Lake Forest, Patricia had marked her. Patricia was a woman who wore her wealth like armor. She was always draped in Chanel, her hair sprayed into an immovable blonde helmet, her eyes cold and calculating like a reptile assessing prey. "She's a librarian, Richard," Patricia had sneered over dinner that very first night, speaking about Sarah as if she wasn't sitting right there. "She has no pedigree, no connections. She's common." "Mother, please," Richard had muttered, staring at his soup. That was the first red flag Sarah ignored. Richard never defended her. He only pleaded for peace. Despite Patricia's objections, they married. Sarah, blinded by love and perhaps a bit of rebellion against her own past, thought she could win Patricia over with kindness. She was wrong. 2 years into the marriage, the abuse had become subtle psychological warfare. Patricia had a key to their house, and she used it. Sarah would come home to find her furniture rearranged because Patricia found Sarah's taste pedestrian. When Sarah cooked, Patricia would accidentally drop salt into the pot while walking by, then loudly complain that Sarah was trying to give Richard hypertension. The breaking point came after the birth of their son, Leo. Leo was a sweet boy, only 18 months old, and the center of Sarah's universe. But to Patricia, Leo was just an heir property of the van der Hoven estate. It was a rainy Tuesday in November. Sarah had returned from a pediatrician appointment to find Patricia and 2 strangers in the nursery. They were measuring the walls. "Patricia, what is going on?" Sarah asked, clutching Leo tight to her chest. Patricia didn't even turn around. "Oh, you're back. Good. These men are contractors. I'm having the nursery expanded and redecorated. That pastel yellow you chose is hideous. It looks like a peasant's daycare. We're doing royal blue and gold." "This is my house," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "You can't just remodel my house without asking." Patricia finally turned, her lips curled in a sneer. "Your house." "My dear, my husband bought this house. My son's name is on the deed. You are just a guest here, a temporary incubator for my grandson." Sarah looked at Richard, who had just walked in the door shaking his umbrella. "Richard, tell her to stop. Tell her she can't do this." Richard looked at his mother, then at his wife. The fear in his eyes was pathetic. Sarah, honey, maybe blue and gold would look nice. Mother has impeccable taste. That was the moment the love died. It wasn't a scream. It was a whisper. Sarah realized she wasn't a wife. She was an accessory to a man who was still a child, controlled by a matriarch who viewed people as possessions. The divorce filing came a month later. Sarah didn't ask for alimony. She didn't ask for the house. She just wanted out, and she wanted full custody of Leo. Patricia's reaction was nuclear. She hired Arthur C. Pearson, a divorce attorney known in Chicago legal circles as the Butcher. He cost $1,500 an hour, and his specialty wasn't just winning cases, it was destroying the opposing party. Patricia had vowed loudly in the middle of the Vanderhoven Country Club, "That little librarian won't get a dime, and she certainly won't keep my grandson. I'll have her living in a cardboard box by Christmas." But there was one variable Patricia Vanderhoven didn't account for. A variable buried deep in Sarah's past. A secret Sarah had kept hidden even from Richard. Sarah Jenkins wasn't just a librarian. Her maiden name wasn't originally Jenkins. She had changed it legally when she was 21, trying to escape the shadow of a father she felt she could never please. Sarah was the estranged daughter of William Sterling. And in the state of Illinois, William Sterling wasn't just a man. He was the hanging judge, a chief justice known for a moral compass so rigid it terrified criminals and corrupt lawyers alike. To understand why Sarah was terrified, you have to understand the silence between her and her father. William Sterling was a man carved from granite. He was a widower who raised Sarah with the same strictness he applied in his courtroom. He demanded excellence. He demanded integrity. When Sarah was 21, she had wanted to go to art school. William had forbidden it, insisting on law school. He wanted a legacy. They had a fight that shook the foundations of their colonial home. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. Sarah accused him of being a heartless tyrant. He accused her of throwing her life away on frivolous dreams. Sarah packed a bag that night. She changed her name to her mother's maiden name. Jenkins moved to Chicago and ghosted her father. For 7 years they hadn't spoken. She sent no Christmas cards. He sent no birthday money. It was a cold war of silence. When she married Richard, she didn't invite her father. She convinced herself she didn't need him. She was independent. Now, sitting in her cramped one-bedroom apartment on the south side of the city, listening to the radiator clank, Sarah felt the crushing weight of that independence. She held the legal notice in her hand. Motion for full custody. Patricia and the Butcher Pearson were playing dirty. They were alleging that Sarah was mentally unstable. They had photos of her living in squalor, the apartment she could barely afford. They claimed she had no support system. "I can't lose him," Sarah whispered to the sleeping toddler in the playpen. "I can't let her turn you into Richard." She had $400 in her bank account. She had a public defender, a weary woman named Janice, who smelled like menthol cigarettes and defeat. Janice had told her yesterday, "Look, honey, they have Pearson. Unless you have a miracle up your sleeve, you might want to consider their settlement offer. Weekend visits only." Weekend visits. The thought made Sarah nauseous. She looked at her phone. She had the number saved. It had been transferred from phone to phone for 7 years, never dialed. Dad. If she called him, he would know she failed. He would know she married the exact kind of weak, wealthy man he had warned her about. He would know she was broke. The shame was a physical weight in her throat. He won't help, she told herself. He's a judge. He can't interfere. It's unethical. But deep down she wanted her dad. Not the judge, but the man who used to carry her on his shoulders before the world hardened him. She didn't call. She couldn't bring herself to do it. She would face this on her own. She put on her only good suit, a navy blue blazer that was slightly frayed at the cuffs, and prepared for war with a plastic spoon against a battalion of tanks. The morning of the hearing was gray and sleeting, the kind of Chicago weather that seeps into your bones. The Cook County Courthouse loomed like a fortress of gray stone. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of floor wax and anxiety. Sarah sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 402, her hands trembling in her lap. Janice, her public defender, was flipping through a messy stack of files, looking stressed. "Okay, Sarah," Janice said, not looking up. "The judge today is usually Judge Henderson. He's okay. He's fair, but he tends to favor stability, which usually means money. We need to emphasize your bond with the child." Just then, the elevator doors dinged, and the atmosphere in the hallway changed. Patricia Vanderhoven stepped out. She looked like she was attending a funeral for an enemy she had personally killed. She wore a black mink coat, diamond stud earrings the size of knuckles, and sunglasses she didn't remove indoors. Flanking her was Richard, looking pale and avoiding Sarah's eyes, and Arthur Pearson. Pearson was a short man with a perfectly tailored suit and a smile that showed too many teeth. They stopped, 10 feet away. Patricia lowered her sunglasses and looked Sarah up and down with a look of pure disgust. "You still have time to sign the papers, Sarah," Patricia said, her voice carrying down the hall. "Save yourself the embarrassment. You look tired. Poor thing." "I'm not signing anything," Sarah said, her voice quiet but steady. "Have it your way," Patricia scoffed. "Richard, don't look at her." Richard obeyed, turning his head toward the wall. "All rise!" the bailiff's voice boomed from inside the courtroom. They filed in. The courtroom was intimidating with high ceilings and dark wood paneling. Sarah took her seat at the defendant's table, feeling small. Patricia and Richard sat behind Pearson at the plaintiff's table, looking like royalty holding court. The bailiff stood by the door. "Docket number 4492, Vanderhoven versus Vanderhoven. Presiding." The bailiff paused, looking at a piece of paper in his hand. He frowned, then cleared his throat. "Presiding, the Honorable Justice William Sterling." Sarah's heart stopped. The blood drained from her face so fast she felt dizzy. No, it couldn't be. Her father was a Supreme Court justice for the state. He didn't handle family court disputes. He didn't do custody hearings in lower courts. But then the door behind the bench opened, and out walked William Sterling. He was older than she remembered. His hair was completely white now, and he had grown a short, neat beard that hid some of his stern jawline. He moved with a slow, terrifying grace. His black robes billowed around him as he ascended the steps to the high chair. He sat down, arranged his files, and looked out over the courtroom. His eyes were like steel lasers. Why was he here? "Please be seated," his voice rumbled. It was the voice of God in Sarah's childhood nightmares. "Judge Henderson has fallen ill this morning. As I was in the building for administrative meetings, I have elected to clear the docket myself to avoid delays." It was a lie. Or maybe a half-truth. William Sterling didn't just fill in. He took over. Sarah slumped in her chair, trying to make herself invisible. If he saw her, if he realized who she was, he would have to recuse himself. The case would be delayed. Or worse, he would stay on and judge her for her failures right there in front of Patricia. Patricia leaned forward to whisper to Pearson, "Who is this? Where is Henderson?" Pearson looked nervous for the first time. "That's Justice Sterling. He's a heavy hitter. Very old school. Hard to bribe, hard to sway." Justice Sterling put on his reading glasses. He picked up the case file. He read the names. Richard Vanderhoven, Sarah Jenkins. He paused. His hand froze on the paper. Sarah held her breath. He knows. Sterling looked up. He looked directly at the defense table. His eyes locked onto Sarah's. For 7 years there had been silence. Now, across the expanse of a courtroom, father and daughter locked eyes. Sarah pleaded silently with her eyes, "Please, Dad, just be a judge today." Sterling's face remained a mask of stone. He showed no recognition, no smile, no frown. He simply looked at her, then shifted his gaze to the plaintiff's table, analyzing Patricia and Richard with cold detachment. "Mr. Pearson?" Sterling said, his voice calm. "I see you are representing the petitioner. You may make your opening statement. And be brief. I do not have patience for theatrics today." Sarah let out a breath. He wasn't recusing himself. He was going to hear the case. Patricia smirked. She whispered to Richard, "He looks strict. He'll hate her poverty. This is perfect." She had no idea she was staring into the eyes of the wolf whose cub she was trying to steal. Arthur C. Pearson did not walk. He prowled. He adjusted his silk tie, a crimson shade that seemed too bright for the drab courtroom, and approached the center of the floor. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at the gallery performing for an audience of ghosts before turning his shark-like gaze onto Sarah. "Your Honor," Pearson began, his voice smooth like expensive scotch. "We are here today not to disparage a mother. No, that is never our intent. We are here to save a child." He paused for effect. Patricia van der Hoven nodded solemnly from her seat, clutching a lace handkerchief she had no intention of crying into. "The facts, Justice Sterling, are simple but tragic." Pearson continued pacing slowly. "My client, Mr. Richard van der Hoven, is a man of substantial means. He can provide the minor child Leo with the best education, the safest home, and a lineage that opens doors across the world. The defendant, Ms. Jenkins," he said her name as if it were a synonym for a disease, "is a woman currently residing in a 600-square-foot apartment in a neighborhood where the crime rate is frankly terrifying. She is unemployed, surviving on meager savings, and as we will demonstrate, psychologically unfit to raise a child of this stature." Sarah gripped the edge of the table. "Psychologically unfit." "Objection!" Janice, Sarah's public defender, squeaked. She cleared her throat and stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. Poverty does not equal unfitness." Justice Sterling didn't move his head. His eyes merely flicked from Pearson to Janice. "Sustained. Mr. Pearson, stick to evidence, not socioeconomic critiques. Being poor is not a crime in my courtroom. Yet." Pearson bristled slightly. He wasn't used to being interrupted during his opening monologue. He forced a tight smile. "Of course, Your Honor. Let us move to evidence, then." He pulled out a stack of enlarged photographs and placed them on an easel. The first photo was of Sarah's apartment kitchen. There were dishes in the sink. A box of cereal was left open on the counter. It looked lived-in messy, perhaps, but normal. "Exhibit A," Pearson announced. "Photos taken by a private investigator 3 days ago. Note the chaos, the filth. Is this a sanitary environment for a toddler?" Sarah gasped. "I was making dinner. I hadn't done the dishes yet," she whispered frantically to Janice. "Shh," Janice hissed. Pearson flipped to the next photo. It was a grainy shot of Sarah sitting on a park bench looking exhausted, her head in her hands, while Leo played in the sand a few feet away. "Exhibit B," Pearson intoned, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Neglect. Here we see the mother disengaged, possibly despondent, ignoring the child in a public space. Anyone could have snatched him. She is too wrapped up in her own depression to protect the heir to the van der Hoven fortune." "Heir," Justice Sterling repeated. The word hung in the air, Pearson stopped. "Excuse me, Your Honor." Sterling leaned forward, his elbows on the heavy oak bench. "You referred to the child as the heir. Is this a custody hearing for a human boy, Mr. Pearson, or a corporate merger?" The courtroom went silent. Patricia's eyes narrowed behind her sunglasses. She wasn't used to judges questioning the terminology of power. Pearson chuckled nervously. "A figure of speech, Your Honor. The point remains. Ms. Jenkins has no family, no support system. She is entirely alone in this world. If she falls ill, who cares for the boy? If she runs out of money, which she will, by next month, who feeds the boy? Mr. Vanderhoven has a staff of nannies, tutors, and a grandmother who is devoted to his well-being." He pointed a manicured finger at Patricia. She lowered her head gracefully, playing the part of the doting matriarch perfectly. "We are asking for full physical custody," Pearson concluded, "with supervised visitation for the mother. We believe her influence is detrimental." Pearson sat down. He looked at Richard and winked. "Call your first witness," Sterling commanded. "I call Mrs. Patricia Vanderhoven to the stand." Patricia stood up. She smoothed her skirt, walked past Sarah without glancing at her, and took the stand. She was sworn in. "Mrs. Vanderhoven," Pearson asked, "describe your relationship with your daughter-in-law." Patricia sighed a long, suffering sound. "I tried, Arthur. I really did. I welcomed her into our home. I gave her clothes. I tried to teach her about culture, about art. But Sarah, she's very simple. She refused my help. She became hostile." "Hostile," Pearson prompted. "Yes, she would scream at Richard. She would forbid me from seeing my grandson. I believe she was jealous of the bond I have with Leo." Patricia looked directly at the judge, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes comprised of blue ice. "Your Honor, I only want what is best for that baby. He needs stability. He needs his family. Sarah has cut herself off from everyone. She is a drifter. A woman with no roots cannot raise a tree." It was a rehearsed line. Sarah knew it. She had heard Patricia practicing it on the phone a week ago. "Thank you, Mrs. Vanderhoven," Pearson said. "Cross-examination," Sterling asked, looking at Janice. Janice stood up, shuffling her papers. She looked terrified of Patricia. Mrs. Vanderhoven, you said Sarah was hostile. Did you ever enter her home without permission?" Patricia laughed softly. "It was my son's home. I don't need permission to visit my son." "But did you use a key to enter when Sarah asked you not to?" "I was checking on the safety of the house. Sarah leaves doors unlocked. She is careless." "Did you rearrange the furniture to undermine her authority?" "I rearranged it because it was ugly," Patricia snapped. "I have standards. Someone has to teach that child aesthetics." Janice looked at the judge, hoping he saw the arrogance. Sterling's face was unreadable. He was writing something on a notepad. "No further questions," Janice said, retreating. Sarah's heart sank. They weren't landing any punches. Patricia was winning simply by being louder, richer, and more confident. "The defense may call its witness," Justice Sterling said. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. It was 11:45 a.m. "I call Sarah Jenkins," Janice said. Sarah stood up. Her legs felt like lead. She walked to the witness box, conscious of the hole in the sole of her left shoe. She sat down. The wood of the chair was hard. She looked at her father. This was the closest she had been to him in 7 years. She could see the lines around his eyes, the way his beard was trimmed perfectly. She could smell the faint scent of old paper and pipe tobacco that always clung to his robes. He didn't look at her as a daughter. He looked at her as a case number. Docket 4492. "State your name for the record," he said. His voice didn't waver. "Sarah Jenkins," she whispered. Louder, please, Sterling said. Sarah Jenkins, she said, projecting her voice. Janice began her questioning. Sarah, do you love your son? More than anything, Sarah said, her voice trembling. He is my life. Mr. Pearson claims you are unfit because you are currently unemployed. Can you explain that I worked for 4 years as an archivist? Sarah said, gaining a little strength. I resigned because my husband insisted I stay home with Leo. He told me it was my job. Now that we are separated, I have 3 interviews lined up for next week. I am not destitute. I am transitioning. And the apartment, the chaos in the photos. I was cooking lasagna, Sarah said, glaring at Pearson. Toddlers make messes. I clean them up. That photo was taken through my window. It's a violation of my privacy. Thank you, Janice said. Sarah, are you a danger to your child? Never. I have never raised a hand to him. I read to him every night. I know he likes his carrots cut into stars, not circles. I know he is afraid of thunderstorms and needs the closet door shut to sleep. Richard doesn't know that. Richard doesn't know the name of his pediatrician. Objection, Pearson shouted. Relevance. Overruled, Sterling said sharply. The father's knowledge of the child is highly relevant to custody. Continue. Sarah felt a tiny spark of hope. Her father was listening. Janice sat down. Your witness. Pearson stood up. He buttoned his jacket. This was the part he enjoyed. The kill. Ms. Jenkins, Pearson began, leaning on the railing of the witness box, invading her personal space. You speak very passionately about being a mother. But let's talk about being a daughter. Sarah froze. You changed your name from Sarah Sterling to Sarah Jenkins 7 years ago. Is that correct? Sarah's eyes darted to the judge. Sterling didn't blink. He stared at Pearson. Yes, Sarah said. Why, I wanted a fresh start. A fresh start? Pearson laughed. Or were you running away? You have no contact with your family, is that correct? Yes. Your father, Pearson said, checking his notes. He obviously hadn't made the connection. To Pearson, Sterling was a common name, and William Sterling was a figure so high up he didn't associate him with this woman in a cheap blazer. Your father is alive. He lives in this state. Yes. And yet you haven't spoken to him in 7 years. Why was there abuse? No, Sarah said quickly. No abuse. Then why? Pearson pressed. Is it because you are difficult? Is it because you are stubborn? Is it because you possess a pathological inability to maintain relationships? You couldn't keep a relationship with your father. You couldn't keep a relationship with your husband. And now you want us to believe you can maintain a relationship with your son. That's not fair, Sarah said, her voice shaking. It is a pattern, Ms. Jenkins, Pearson shouted. A pattern of isolation. You isolate yourself. And if we give you Leo, you will isolate him. You will drag him down into your world of lonely, bitter estrangement. You have no support system. If you get sick tomorrow, who comes? No one. Because you drove them all away. I have friends. Friends, Pearson scoffed. Librarians, do they have the resources to protect a Van der Hoeven heirloom? Pearson walked back to his table and picked up a document. Ms. Jenkins admitted. You are out of your depth. You married a man for his money, found out that being a rich wife actually required social grace you don't possess, and now you are trying to use the child as a meal ticket. That is a lie. Sarah stood up, her hands slamming on the railing. I never asked for money. I don't want his money. Then give up custody, Pearson roared. If it's not about the money, let the boy live in the mansion where he belongs. Let him have the life he deserves. He deserves a mother who loves him, not a grandmother who views him as a trophy, Sarah screamed back. Your Honor, Patricia shouted from her seat, unable to help herself. She is hysterical. Look at her. She's unstable. Order! Justice. Sterling slammed his gavel. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. Mr. Pearson, Sterling said, his voice dangerously low. You are badgering the witness. I'm establishing credibility, Your Honor, Pearson said, smirking. This woman has hidden her past. She hides her family. She is secretive and deceitful. We don't even know who her people are. She is a nobody who came from nowhere. Justice Sterling looked at Sarah. For a fleeting second, Sarah saw something in his eyes. It wasn't warmth. It was pain. Regret. Ms. Jenkins, Sterling said, addressing her directly. Mr. Pearson raises a point about support systems. It is a valid concern for the court. If you were to face a crisis, do you have family you could call? Sarah looked at her father. This was the test. He was asking her publicly if she would ever come back. Or maybe he was trapping her. She took a deep breath. She looked at Patricia, looking smug in her furs. She looked at Richard, looking at the floor. She looked at Pearson the shark. Sarah started. I have a father. He is a man of great principle. Sterling's pen stopped moving. But, Sarah continued, tears spilling over, I disappointed him. I made choices he didn't agree with. I was proud, and he was proud, and we let the silence grow too long. She looked directly at the judge. But I know, she said, her voice gaining strength, that if my son was ever in danger, if I really needed him, my father would be there, because he is a protector. He stands up for what is right. Even if he is angry with me, he hates injustice. The courtroom was silent. Sterling stared at her. His jaw tightened. He slowly uncapped his pen and wrote a single word on his pad. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins, Sterling said softly. You may step down. Sarah returned to her seat, trembling. Pearson looked confused. He had expected the judge to berate her for the lack of family. Instead, the mood had shifted. It felt heavy. Mr. Pearson, Sterling said. Do you have any further witnesses? No, Your Honor. The plaintiff rests. Defense. We rest, Your Honor, Janice said. Justice Sterling closed the file folder. He interlaced his fingers. I have heard enough, Sterling said. I am ready to issue a ruling. Already? Pearson asked, surprised. Your Honor, usually there are closing arguments. I do not need closing arguments to see the truth of this matter, Sterling said. Stand up. Everyone stood. The court finds, Sterling began, that the plaintiff Richard Vanderhoven, though financially capable, has demonstrated a remarkable lack of backbone. Richard flinched. The court also finds, Sterling continued, looking at Patricia, that the paternal grandmother, Mrs. Vanderhoven, seems to be the driving force behind this litigation. This court is not fond of proxy wars. Patricia's mouth dropped open. Excuse me. However, Sterling said, turning to Sarah, the court is concerned about the defendant's financial stability. Sarah held her breath. Here it came. The gavel drop. Therefore, Sterling said, I am ordering a temporary continuance of the current custody arrangement. What? Patricia shrieked. She keeps him for 30 days, Sterling said, ignoring her. During which time Ms. Jenkins will be required to secure gainful employment and suitable housing. If she does so, full custody will be awarded to her with standard visitation for the father. It was a lifeline. It wasn't a total win, but it was a chance. This is outrageous, Patricia yelled. She stepped out from behind the table. Do you know who we are? Do you know how much tax money my husband pays in this city? Mrs. Vanderhoven, sit down, Pearson hissed, grabbing her arm. No. Patricia pulled away. She was red in the face. The mask of the socialite had slipped, revealing the tyrant underneath. This judge is incompetent. He is clearly biased. Look at him looking at her with those soft eyes. What did she do? Did she sleep with you too? The entire courtroom gasped. Sarah's eyes went wide. Don't, she whispered. Justice Sterling rose from his seat. He seemed to grow 3 feet taller. His face was thunderous. Mrs. van der Hoven, he boomed. You are in contempt. I am in the right, Patricia screamed. She walked toward the defense table. She was losing control. She had never lost in her life. She couldn't handle the word no. She reached Sarah. Sarah stood up, backing away. You little witch, Patricia hissed, her eyes manic. You poisoned the judge. You manipulated everyone. You are not taking my grandson. Patricia, stop, Sarah said, putting her hands up. Don't you tell me to stop. And then it happened. Patricia van der Hoven, the queen of Lake Forest, swung her arm back. Smack! The sound was sickeningly loud. Patricia's diamond-encrusted hand connected with Sarah's cheek with full force. Sarah stumbled back, hitting the table, clutching her face. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Patricia stood there, chest heaving, hand stinging. She felt a moment of triumphant release. She had put the girl in her place. Then she heard the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. A heavy wooden chair. She looked up. Justice William Sterling was no longer behind the bench. He had descended the stairs. He was walking across the floor of the courtroom. He wasn't walking like a judge. He was walking like a tank. His robes flowed behind him like the wings of an avenging angel. His face was a color of rage that Arthur Pearson had never seen in a human being before. Bailiff, Sterling roared, his voice shaking the walls. Arrest that woman. Patricia looked confused. What? You can't arrest me. It's a civil court. Sterling didn't stop walking until he was 3 feet from Patricia. He towered over her. You just assaulted a litigant in my courtroom? Sterling snarled, his voice low and terrifying. You just assaulted a woman who is under the protection of the law. She's a nobody, Patricia spat, though her voice faltered as she looked into Sterling's eyes. She's just a trashy little... She is my daughter! The scream tore from Sterling's throat, echoing off the high ceilings. The world seemed to stop spinning. Patricia froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Richard looked up, his eyes bulging. Pearson dropped his pen. Sarah, holding her throbbing cheek, looked at her father. He was standing in front of her, shielding her body with his own. He was shaking. She, Patricia whispered. She is your... What? Sterling stared down at Patricia with a look of pure, unadulterated loathing. You just struck Sarah, Sterling, the judge said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You just struck the daughter of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Illinois. Sterling turned to the bailiffs who were standing stunned by the door. Get her out of my sight, Sterling barked. Cuff her. Charge her with assault battery and contempt of court. Maximum bail. If she speaks another word, gag her. As the bailiffs moved in, grabbing Patricia's mink-covered arms, she began to struggle. Wait, I didn't know Richard did something. Richard sat in his chair, shrinking into a ball. He said nothing. I didn't know, Patricia wailed as they dragged her toward the side door. Sterling didn't watch her go. He turned around. He looked at Sarah. Her cheek was already turning purple. The hanging judge vanished. The father returned. His hands, usually so steady, shook as he reached out. He didn't care about the court reporter. He didn't care about the ethics committee. He reached out and cupped her face. Sarah, he choked out. I'm so sorry. The courtroom had been cleared. The gallery, which had been buzzing with the scandal of the century, was ushered out by bailiffs who looked equally shocked. Sarah sat on a plush leather sofa in the judge's private chambers. The room smelled of mahogany and old books, a scent that instantly transported her back to her childhood, to the library where she used to hide and read while her father wrote his opinions. A court medic, a kind woman named Maria, was gently applying a cold compress to Sarah's cheek. The skin was already swelling, a violent shade of crimson blooming against her pale complexion. "It's not broken, honey," Maria said softly. "But you're going to have a nasty bruise for a week. Ice it every 2 hours." The heavy oak door opened. Justice William Sterling walked in. He had removed his black robe. Underneath, he wore a crisp white shirt and a dark tie loosened at the collar. He looked smaller, without the robes more human, and infinitely more tired. He stopped at the door, looking at Sarah. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence that had stretched for 7 years still hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Thank you, Maria," William said, his voice raspy. "Please give us a moment." Maria nodded, packed her kit, and slipped out, closing the door with a soft click. William walked over to the wet bar in the corner. His hands, usually steady enough to sign death warrants, were trembling slightly. He poured a glass of water and brought it to Sarah. "Here," he said. Sarah took the glass. Her fingers brushed his. "Thank you." William pulled a chair opposite her and sat down. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, clasping his hands. He looked at the bruise on her face, and his jaw tightened so hard a muscle twitched in his cheek. "I should have held her in contempt the moment she opened her mouth." William muttered more to himself than her. "I let it go on too long. I wanted to see if you could handle it. I risked your safety to test your strength. That was a failure of judgment." "I handled it, Dad," Sarah said softly. "I didn't hit her back." William let out a short, dry laugh. "No, you didn't. You have more restraint than I do. If I hadn't been wearing that robe—" He trailed off, the implication clear. He looked her in the eyes. "Sarah, why?" It was the question that encompassed everything. Why the silence? Why the name change? Why Richard Sarah lowered the ice pack? "Because you said I wouldn't make it," she said, her voice wavering. "The last night we spoke. You told me that if I walked out that door to pursue a useless life, I would come crawling back within a year. You said I was soft." William flinched, as if she had slapped him. "I was angry. I was scared you were throwing your potential away." "I wanted to prove you wrong," Sarah said. "I wanted to prove I could build a life without the Sterling name. And I did. I was happy, Dad. Before things got bad. I loved my job at the library. I loved being a mother." "I know," William said. Sarah looked up sharply. "How do you know?" William sighed. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He opened it. Tucked behind his ID was a small, creased photograph. It was a picture of Sarah pushing a stroller in Lincoln Park. It had been taken from a distance. "I hired a private investigator 5 years ago." William admitted, his voice thick with shame. "I knew where you lived. I knew when you got married. I knew when Leo was born." "You spied on me?" Sarah asked, a mix of anger and relief washing over her. "I checked on you," he corrected. "Every month I got a report. I knew you were safe. I told myself that was enough. I told myself that if you wanted me, you would call. I was waiting for you to make the first move because I was too proud to admit I was wrong." He looked at the floor. "When I saw the docket this morning, Vanderhoven versus Vanderhoven, I recognized the name. I knew who Richard was from the reports. I knew his mother was a viper. I switched with Judge Henderson specifically because I knew you wouldn't have the money for a high-powered attorney. I wanted to ensure the trial was fair." "You rigged the court?" Sarah asked, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I managed the docket," William said with a hint of his old arrogance. "There is a difference." He leaned forward and took her hand. His skin was rough, warm, and familiar. "I saw you today, Sarah. Standing there, defending your son against that shark Pearson and that harpy Patricia. You weren't soft. You were steel. You are more of a sterling than I ever was." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. "I'm broke, Dad. I'm living in a shoebox. I failed." "You didn't fail," William said fiercely. "You survived. And you are not broke. You are the daughter of William Sterling, and I have missed out on 3 years of my grandson's life. I do not intend to miss a single day more." There was a knock at the door. "Enter," William barked, wiping his eyes quickly. It was a bailiff. "Your Honor, Mr. Pearson is outside. He says he needs to speak with you regarding the defendant." William stood up. The tenderness vanished, replaced by the icy demeanor of the Chief Justice. "Send him in," William said, "and tell him to bring Mr. Vanderhoven." Arthur Pearson looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a landmine. He walked into the chambers with his head bowed, his usual swagger completely evaporated. Richard trailed behind him, looking terrified. "Justice Sterling," Pearson began, his voice trembling. I want to express my deepest apologies. We had no idea that my daughter was a human being deserving of dignity," Sterling cut him off. "Or no idea that she had a father who could disbar you with a phone call." Pearson swallowed hard. "The assault was inexcusable. I have already withdrawn as counsel for Mrs. Vanderhoven. I cannot represent a client who attacks an opposing party in open court." "Wise choice," Sterling said dryly. "Because if you were still her lawyer, you would be named as a co-defendant in the civil suit my daughter is going to file." Richard stepped forward. "Sir, Justice Sterling, is she in jail?" Sterling turned his gaze to his son-in-law. He looked Richard up and down with clinical distaste. "Your mother is currently being processed at Cook County Jail," Sterling said. "She has been charged with aggravated battery contempt of court and disorderly conduct. Given the flight risk and the severity of the attack on a protected party, bail has been set at $500,000. I doubt she will be home for dinner." Can I pay it?" Richard asked weakly. "You can do whatever you like," Sterling said. "But I have a question for you, Mr. Vanderhoven. When your mother raised her hand to your wife, the mother of your child, why did you sit there?" Richard stammered. I was shocked. I didn't think." "Exactly," Sterling said. "You didn't think. You let your mother run your marriage, you let her run your divorce, and you let her assault your wife. You are not a father-son. You are a dependent." Sterling picked up a file from his desk. "This is the temporary custody order. I am amending it. Due to the violent nature of the paternal grandmother and your inability to protect the child from her, I am granting Sarah full legal and physical custody, effective immediately. You will have supervised visitation only. And that visitation will not occur in the presence of Patricia Vanderhoven. If she comes within 500 feet of my grandson, I will have her arrested for violating a restraining order. Do I make myself clear?" Richard looked at Sarah. He looked at the bruise on her face. For the first time, the reality of what he had lost seemed to hit him. "Sarah," Richard whispered, "I'm sorry." "Save it, Richard," Sarah said, her voice steady. "Go bail out your mother. She's the only woman you've ever really committed to." Richard hung his head and walked out. Pearson lingered for a second. "Justice Sterling, About my standing with the Bar Association." "Get out, Arthur," Sterling said. Pearson fled. 3 months later. The Sunday dinner table at the Sterling estate was set for 3. The dining room, once a place of silent, oppressive meals, was now chaotic in the best possible way. High chairs don't usually match antique mahogany, but William Sterling didn't care. "More peas, please," Leo chirped, banging his plastic spoon on the table. "Say please, grandfather," Sarah corrected, smiling. "Peas, Gramps," Leo shouted. William Sterling, the terror of the Illinois judicial system, chuckled. He spooned a helping of peas onto the toddler's plate. "There you go, counselor." Sarah looked around the room. She wasn't living here. She had refused her father's offer to move back in fully. Instead, she had accepted a loan from him to rent a nice 2-bedroom townhome in a safe neighborhood. She had also accepted his help in networking. She was now working as a paralegal at a mid-sized firm with plans to finish her law degree at night. Patricia Vanderhoven had not fared as well. The assault video captured by the courtroom security cameras had somehow leaked to the press. The image of the billionaire socialite slapping a defenseless woman had gone viral. The slap heard round the suburbs became a meme. Humiliated and facing jail time, Patricia had taken a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to battery. Her sentence included 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, which she was serving by picking up trash on the highway, much to the delight of the local tabloids, and mandatory anger management therapy. But the worst punishment for Patricia wasn't the law. It was the isolation. The social circles of Chicago are unforgiving. Patricia was radioactive. She was no longer the queen of Lake Forest. She was the crazy woman who hit a judge's daughter. She spent her days alone in her mansion, Richard having finally moved to a condo downtown to escape her toxicity. Sarah took a sip of her wine. "Dad?" "Yes," William asked, wiping pea puree off his tie. "Thanks for the loan. I'll pay you back the first installment next month." William waved his hand. "Forget the money. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't wait 7 years to tell me when you're in trouble next time. I can't fight for you if I don't know the war is happening." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Deal." Leo threw a pea at the judge's forehead. It stuck for a second, then fell. William picked up the pea, inspected it, and looked at his grandson with mock severity. "Assaulting a judicial officer. A serious offense. The sentence is tickles." As the room filled with the sound of a toddler's laughter and a grandfather's joy, Sarah finally knew that she wasn't just safe. She was home. And that is the story of how one arrogant slap brought down a dynasty. Patricia Vanderhoven learned the hard way that you never judge a book by its cover, and you certainly never slap a woman in court without checking who her father is first. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about money or status. It's about character. Sarah found hers, and in doing so, she not only saved herself but reclaimed the father she thought she had lost. What do you think? Was the judge's punishment for Patricia enough? Or should she have spent time behind bars? And would you have forgiven your father after 7 years of silence? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We post new drama every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind, because you never know who is watching from the bench.